What's up everybody? Even before its official reveal, there has been a lot of confusion surrounding Overwatch's sequel, Overwatch 2. However, BlizzCon 2019 gave us a fairly concrete image of what to expect. It'll have some slick graphic and engine improvements, cool new PvE modes, along with a multitude of new maps, heroes, and other content additions. And the best part about it, most of this new content will be free for those of us who already own Overwatch 1. So in a lot of ways, Overwatch 2 can be seen as just a massive update that'll add new content onto the original, right? Well, as time goes on and we gradually begin to learn more and more about the sequel, it looks like this might not actually be the case. But then, what exactly is in store for Overwatch's highly anticipated and very mysterious sequel? Well, that's exactly what we'll be diving into with today's video. This is Master Ian Gamer, and to start, I'd just like to remind you that if you end up enjoying this video, then be sure to subscribe and ram that bell icon to both help out my channel and keep you up to date on all future Overwatch news and content. But now, let's take a look at what's really going on with Overwatch 2. As I mentioned, Overwatch 2 will function largely as an expansion on the existing Overwatch 1. All cosmetics and progression you've achieved in the original will carry over to the sequel, meaning you don't have to worry about losing any of those cool limited time skins you were fortunate enough to have unlocked. On top of that, all the graphical changes, new heroes, and maps which release with and after Overwatch 2 will be available for those of us who already own the original at no extra charge, with the PvE mission modes and corresponding features being so far the only known major content to be locked behind whatever new paywall gets introduced. However, between BlizzCon 2019 and now, there have been some notable remarks made by Overwatch game director Jeff Kaplan regarding the development of Overwatch's sequel, which kind of contradict what we thought Overwatch 2 was going to be. The main interview I'd like to address is one Jeff did with PC Games back in March. In it, he talked quite a bit about the Overwatch dev team's experience while working on the game over the years, and how that relates to the sequel going forward. When asked about how developing Overwatch 1 will transition into developing Overwatch 2, Jeff had a rather telling response, which is very important to focus on. Overwatch 2 is fantastic for the development team. When it comes to the milestones on a live game, well, there's before you announce, you can make very drastic and radical decisions. I'll give you an example. We had moments where the game was 8 versus 8, we had moments where the game was 4 versus 4, we tried 5 versus 5, 7 versus 7. Those are not the type of choices we can make anymore. We can't do it because we have a built-in audience. We have a pro sports league that was built around a certain size, the technology has been optimized for 4 different platforms, and we have memory constraints. Those are the type of decisions you can make in early development. Now that Overwatch is 4 years old, we have to be very careful about the amount of dramatic decisions that we make and how it affects a player base that has been playing for a long time. So the experimental composition experiment we ran recently that was 3 damage, 2 support, and 1 tank, that decision is the kind of thing that the design team can make in alpha or in beta and just go, this is better for the game, we're doing this. You make that decision, know it's better for the game, and move on. Weirdly, I think there's so much good about the 3-2-1 experiment, but I don't feel comfortable pushing it live in 2020. What Overwatch 2 becomes for us is another great opportunity. It's a moment where people expect and are hoping for radical change. This is what a sequel is all about. You're not just going to give us the same game again, right? So as developers, I think we can all be excited about the opportunity that Overwatch 2 brings for, okay, it's time. We've been playing the same game for many years now, it's time to move on to the next thing. This statement very clearly emphasizes that Overwatch 2 is more than just an expansion. Despite all the content and player progression which will carry over from the original, Blizzard is approaching it first and foremost as a sequel, and that includes potentially making drastic changes like how many players are on a team or the ratio of players for each role. In fact, looking at some of these specific core changes Jeff has alluded to for Overwatch 2, a change to role queue role distributions seems extremely likely. Even outside of this interview, Jeff has strongly suggested that he's personally a fan of the 3-2-1 team composition. 3 damage, 2 support, and 1 tank better represents the distribution of which roles people actually want to play. But as he said in the PC Games interview, this kind of change just couldn't be executed at this point in Overwatch 1. But in Overwatch 2, that seems to be a very realistic opportunity. I talked about the problems of DPS queue times in a past video of mine, which I strongly recommend that you check out if you haven't already, but to give a brief explanation, opening up more room for DPS players without devastating the tank and support roles would require radical rebalancing of basically the entire hero roster in order to pull off. Changes of this scale would be too extreme to try and push with just a single patch, but in a sequel where Blizzard has the opportunity to rebalance things from the most fundamental level, that is where we could actually see an improvement in DPS queue times without making the other roles necessarily suffer. But sticking on the topic of this video, Jeff's acknowledgement of radical changes like this being a possibility for Overwatch 2 indicates that they are willing to break the mold set by Overwatch 1, and he's even alluded to some of these other fundamental changes. Another one of these, which Jeff acknowledged in the quote I read earlier, has to do with the number of players per team. Evidently, while developing Overwatch 1, Blizzard experimented with teams of 4, 5, 7, and even 8 players before ultimately settling on 6. Even more so than role queue, team sizes are a very fundamental aspect of Overwatch and could not easily be changed at this point due to technical limitations and the esports scene which has been built upon the 6v6 format. So if Jeff sees Overwatch 2 as being an opportunity to potentially adjust the size of competitive teams, this would force substantial readjustments for the Overwatch League, as well as hero balance within the game itself. Just like how changing the distribution of roles would have massive balance repercussions, adding or removing one or more player slots from a team would have similar effects. So regardless of whether they do make this sort of team size change, it indicates Jeff's mindset that Overwatch 2 can and will bring about major changes to how the game plays at its most fundamental level. Another indication Jeff made of big changes coming with the sequel was on the forums in his post outlining the recent crowd control changes. While most of this post focused on the balance changes which at this point have already gone live, he made this brief yet notable remark. Internally, we have some bigger ideas about crowd control for Overwatch 2, and are trying some experiments we're not able to bring to the experimental card. More fundamental and larger changes. Again, this indication that Overwatch 2 will feature drastic changes to crowd control further suggests that the heroes themselves will be undergoing some radical balance changes. If the changes they're talking about internally are too substantial to even be tested in the experimental card, then it's safe to assume that Jeff is talking about something big, possibly being on the technical side of how crowd control works, or even entire reworks for existing CC-oriented heroes. Based on these details, Overwatch 2 is starting to look much less like an Overwatch 1 upgrade, and much more like a true sequel that, once released, will be recognizable as its own standalone title. In fact, I'm willing to bet that the gameplay we saw and experienced at BlizzCon 2019 won't even end up being very representative of what Overwatch 2 actually looks like once it finally releases. Based on what we've learned since then, it sounds like the demo was more akin to Overwatch 1 than whatever Blizzard ultimately has in mind for the sequel. And as I'm sure many of you have realized, this means that many things you know and love about Overwatch 1 might not be the same in the sequel. For example, say you love Roadhog as he is now. You love his kit, you love his role, everything about him is exactly as you like. Once Overwatch 2 releases, there's no guarantee that he'll be even remotely the same. He could get pushed into the damage category. He could have his hook massively reworked in order to minimize crowd control. The Roadhog you know and love today might not exist in Overwatch 2. In fact, based on what has been said about Overwatch 2 being an opportunity to introduce massive core changes to the game, it almost seems more likely than not that no matter what heroes you play right now, they'll in some way be different following the release of the sequel. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing. While change is often scary, especially when it comes to changing something you already love, it can also be an opportunity to change things for the better. Is Roadhog already fun? Sure, but that doesn't mean he couldn't become even more fun. Blizzard is making Overwatch 2 so that they can push bigger and better changes. As Jeff said, there's only so much they can do to a game after it's been released, but through a sequel, the devs can take everything they've learned from the past 4 years to craft a new and improved version of the game we already know and love. Now, Overwatch 2 is a bit unique in that rather than being a separate separate standalone title like how many developers handle sequels, Overwatch 2 will be a merging of content from the old game into the new. Based on what the devs have said so far, Overwatch 1 won't exist anymore after the sequel launches, but they're doing that on purpose. By merging the two, you get to keep all your cosmetics and progression. All the hours and money you've invested in the original will live on in the sequel, and I'd say that's just about the most consumer-friendly thing Blizzard could do. Sure, you may never get to go back and play Overwatch 1 Roadhog again, but at the same time, most companies shut down the servers for old games not long after their sequel releases anyways. And by having everyone play together on the new Overwatch 2 servers instead of being split between the two games, we can expect better matchmaking and queue times for everyone. Personally, I'd take that any day over the more commonplace alternatives. So while at first the idea of Overwatch 2 pushing massive core changes to the franchise may sound a bit intimidating, I firmly believe that this is still the best way to handle it from a consumer-friendly standpoint. While I'm not a fan of change simply for the sake of change, I do agree with Jeff Kaplan's mentality that Overwatch 2 is an opportunity to change things that maybe aren't necessarily bad in Overwatch 1, but could viably be improved in a sequel. Things like giving players more room to play the type of heroes they want, or minimizing annoying mechanics that turn certain players away. And even if Blizzard steps a little too far and changes things a little too much in one area or another, they can always adjust it as time goes on. Look at Overwatch 1 right now compared to back in 2016. It's still fundamentally the same game, but Blizzard has tweaked it in numerous places to make the overall experience far superior to what it was 4 years ago. Overwatch 2 is just a fresh start for Blizzard to rebuild Overwatch from the ground up, using all the information and experience they've accumulated from the first. You're free to set your expectations however you want, but as an optimist, I see this as a grand opportunity for Overwatch to be improved in ways we may never have even thought possible. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on Overwatch 2 bringing big radical changes in the comments down below. Are you excited to see Overwatch fundamentally reworked, or perhaps you'd rather have most things go unchanged? Either way, be sure to subscribe, ram that bell, follow me on Twitter at MasterEnGamer, and check out my Discord server to never miss any future Overwatch news and content. If you'd like to support my videos, then you can become a channel member by hitting that join button down below to get cool rewards like the people you see here. Otherwise, this is MasterEnGamer signing off, and until next time, stay safe out there everyone, and have a great day.